So here's another example. We're going to reduce this matrix to reduced row echelon form and find the solution. So there's a couple of things you could do to get this started. You could switch R1 and R2, then you'd have this row with the leading -1 first, and then you could switch the signs, and then you'd have your 1 in that spot. But let's try something different here, just to give you an idea of the different things that you can do to reduce these matrices. So let's try adding R1 and R2. And replacing the numbers on R1. So that'll give me 2 minus 1, so that's 1. -3 plus 1 is -2. 2 plus 0 is 2. -20 plus 5, that's -15. And then put the other 2 back on. So now I have my pivot 1 here, and I'm going to use that to zero out this element. So that would be R1 plus R2 gives row 2. So that's 1 plus -1 is 0. -2 plus 1 is -1. 2 plus 0, is 2. And -15 plus 5 is -10. And then put the other 2 back on. And then we have that. So now we can use this one as a pivot to eliminate this 3 and make it a 0. So we would say -3 R1 plus R3 gives new numbers on row 3. So that would give us -3 plus 3, so that's 0. And then -3 times -2, that's 6. Minus 1 is 5. -3 times 2 is -6. Minus 4 is -10. And then -3 times -15, that's 45. Plus 9, that's 54. Now put the other rows back on. And now we have that. So I'm looking right here, and I can see that I do have a -1 there, so I can just change the signs on row 2. So I'm going to write that by saying -1 R2 gives me new numbers on row 2. So that would just be 0, 1, -2, +10, and put the other 2 back on. And then we have that. So now I've got this 1 I use as a pivot to zero out the 5. So that would be -5 R2 plus R3 gives new numbers on row 3. So that's, the 0 isn't going to do anything to this 0. So that's -5 plus 5 is 0. And that's 10 minus 10, which is 0. And that's -50 plus 54, so that's 4. And I put the other 2 rows back up. And then I have that. So there's something different happening here, because you can see right here you've got a 0 in the Z position, and that's saying 0 times Z is equal to 4, and that is not a possibility. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to reduce this row by dividing it by 4, which is going to give me a leading one way over here. All right, so I'm going to have a leading one in this row. So this is a leading one. Now looking at this row, my leading one is in this column. So, excuse me, I might have said row, but I meant column. Okay, so I've got a leading one in this row. Now if I look down here, I don't have a leading one here like I did in the previous several examples, but I can get a leading one all the way over here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So row 3 divided by 4 is going to give me new numbers on row 3. So that'll just be 0. Let me change back to my other color. 0, 0, 0, 1. Put the other two back on, and then I have that. So let's examine what we have now. So this column looks complete here. Looking at this column right here, here's my leading one, which I could use as a pivot. I need to zero out this element here. So as soon as you hit a leading one in a row, you've got to make sure that every other element in that column is zeroed out by using the 1 as a pivot. So I'm going to say 2 R2 plus R1, new numbers on row 1. So that's going to be 2 times 0 added to 1, so that isn't going to change. Now 2 times 1 is 2, minus 2 is 0. And 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, plus 2, that's negative 2. Whoops. Negative 2, and then one more. 2 times 10, that's 20, minus 5 is 5. And then put the other ones back. And then we have that. So here's my leading one in row 1, and I have 0, 0, so that column is good. Here's my leading one in row 2, so I have 0, 0, so that's good. Now all the way over to here, here's my leading one in row 3, so I need a 0 here and a 0 here. So the next thing we'll do is zero out the 10. So using this one as a pivot, I'm going to multiply by negative 10. So that's negative 10 R3. So negative 10 R3 plus R2. Gives new numbers on row 2. All right, so that's negative 10 times 1 added to 10. So that's the only thing that's going to change. That's going to become a 0. And because these are all zeros here, those will not change these numbers here. So I'll have 0. Okay. Hold on. Pen's not writing. I'll have 0, 1, negative 2, and 0. And then I'll put the other two rows back on, and then I have that. So, because my leading ones I've showed you have zeros in the other two positions, so here and here. Well, there's one more that we haven't gotten to yet, it looks like. So this one I need to use to zero out this 5. So I'm going to say negative 5 R3 added to R1. New numbers on row 1. So that's going to be, so those zeros aren't going to change these 3 numbers, but I'm going to be able to zero out this 5. All right, then we'll put the other two back on, and then we have that. So what's happening here And this is what you look for when you have a no solution situation. Right here is what it looks like. So the reason this is a no solution situation is because 0z equals 1 is what that equation is telling me here. All right, and that would lead you to have to believe that 0 is equal to 1, which we know is false. 0 is not equal to 1. So if you get a false situation right there, where I circled, you're going to conclude that there is no solution. And then you're going to stop at that point. And there's nothing further to do. So we're reduced. So the matrix is reduced to reduced row echelon. And we conclude that we have no solution and we're finished.